in the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What a pity. Tomorrow never certain. What dwells behind the curtain? The face of evil lurking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannons could breach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. Hey, I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Can I be heard? I presume so. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to my channel. My name is Ike Ogiamin, and over here we talk about being better and doing better. How is everybody doing? And what are we doing today? Today we're having a conversation, an important conversation, and actually I will be dropping the link down below. A very important conversation because it's a conversation that has to do with one of the main attributes of what you might consider a nation. You can think of borders as a geographical aspect. You can think of language and culture, right? Three basic low resolution type attributes you can look at: borders, language, culture. Hence, all countries have borders. Most countries enforce them in order to benefit the natives, right? Benefit the citizens of the country or the government or whomever. So the idea is, well, what should be the immigration policy then? What should be the goals and whatnot? Ladies and gentlemen, let's see what you guys are up to here. I believe we got, shout out to J Bones in the house, Mr. Awesome. We got Man of Tomorrow in the house. Let me get my eyes straight here. Shout out to you all. Shout out to you all. Okay. A few weeks ago, we had a conversation on this channel here. Well, at least it was on Case Closed, maybe it was on Solo's channel. And we were talking about the Haitian immigrants. You see, illegal immigration should not be condoned, right? Hence, the question is, what should the legal immigration look like? And whom owes whom what? So the title says exploitation, and the thumbnail shows a question about owing. What do immigrants owe? Let us see, let us see, let us see. So immigration is an important thing in terms of different people have their different policy, different pet policy issues. You might be into fiscal policy. You might be into the taxes. You might be into monetary policy and the printing of the Fed. Your thing might be certain civil rights like freedom of speech and DVOC 19 Mask versus no mask. Well, immigration is one of those as well. And where immigration falls for me in terms of the hierarchy of policies is close to home because I myself am an immigrant, right? And now I go back and forth, an immigrant in several places, I guess. You see, and the thing about that is something that I discussed earlier in one of my videos, talked about the inferiority complex, which inevitably leads to a kind of overcompensation that happens on both sides, both the immigrant side and the native side, that will cause certain amount of friction. But ladies and gentlemen, let me go ahead and see if I can play this video. Let's begin with this aspect of the video here, because this question about what type of people then and how should we let them in, how many, so on and so forth. It's not a question you can avoid. And this goes for all American citizens, right? ADOS, foundational Black Americans, have made and continue to make tremendous contributions to the making of America a more perfect union. Therefore, whatever America has to say about the composition of migrants that come in, what the rules should be, should reflect the wishes, the desires, the desired political outcomes of the FBA ADOS community. So far, so good. So far, so good. Shout out to Bijou Noir in the house. I mean, does it make sense? Basically, border, language, culture, border, very important. ADOS make tremendous contributions into the progress that has been made within the particular border region. Therefore, like every other constituent of every other community, you get to say, well, these are the rules as to the borders. So I think that there is no question as to the legitimacy of ADOS FBA saying, hey, we have something to say about immigration. I think that much is clear and might give us some insight here into particular angles and whatnot. Let me see what's going on over here in the chat. I see. Yes, yes, yes. Shout out to Falcon Black in the building. Shout out to Falcon Black in the building. So again, I said immigration hits close to home because I'm an immigrant. And then I talk about the fact that immigration policy is something that you cannot avoid as a question. And then as a constituent of a country, United States, and whatever contributions or whatever interest you have in that, you have a right as to, well, what the immigration policy should be. So that is not at all in question. Now, let me play something real quick here for us to begin to see and discuss what the various possible attributes and characteristics of people that you want could look like. Because you may be wanting to bring people in for reasons of their skill, for reasons of the wages that you can pay them, for reasons of, well, skilled labor is a huge part, right? However, you may also want to say, well, I want people from with a certain kind of cultural background also. Well, is it taking it too far when you ask that question about the cultural background of the people? Is that taking it too far? Let's see here. Let us see. Shout out to my man Glenn Lowry. I'm gonna play a quick few minutes fair use. And this video is called, Will Asian Immigrants Change American Culture? It's a clip from a conversation.
The year before COVID, I had said I had given a talk on immigration in which I had said that I thought our policy should be geared much more to cultural compatibility, but we have to face up to the fact that there's a Western world and then there's a non-Western world or a third world in which many of our values are not shared.
Okay, so cultural compatibility, values, different realms and different yay or nay? Can I get a 1 if you agree so far with Amy Wax that these are realities, that the reality of cultural compatibility, the reality of there is a quote unquote West, or there is an East, or there's a Middle East, there is a this or that civilization, and they may or may not be compatible with each other depending on which ones you're comparing? Or is that all made up? What do we think about that? Is there a right way to think about that, a wrong way to think about that? Or are these just facts that there's such a thing as cultural compatibility and it is something that you should consider when talking about the composition of your body polity, if you will, the composition of your country itself? Okay, well, let's see.
In fact, people are fairly familiar with them. They're certainly not inculcated, and that it's just harder to assimilate those people or to have confidence that our way of life will continue if we bring a lot of people in who are not familiar with it, who don't have fealty to it or allegiance to it or whatever. And
Allegiance to something. Now, this is an aspect, okay, that very word there, allegiance, this is an aspect of the rift between FBA and immigrants that I think is important here. Because if we agree that borders are a thing that you cannot ignore and you need to have policy with regards to immigration, whom is allowed, how much of them, and whatnot. And then you also perhaps agree that there's such a thing as culture and cultural compatibility and whatnot, right? Then is it not okay to ask, hey, these African immigrants, do they have allegiance to X, Y, or Z? Right? What is their allegiance? Are they down for the cause? Is that a legitimate question? Let me see here. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, the super chats. The super chat button still works. And thank you for contributing in the chat. It says, why pay an American person $600 a week when I could pay $600 a month? Well, that is a definite question that I think is going to end up on when we talk about part of the solutions. This is the aspect here, because there's a big geopolitical background and economic background that's going on behind this, right? Now we're at the local level. We're looking and we're talking about individual constituent communities within a border and what their interests may or may not be, right? And and we shall see. Hey, what's up? Looking sharp there.
Oh, what's happening, man?
Let me give you that aspect ratio that you enjoy so much.
Oh yeah.
Well, So far, I don't know if you've heard what Professor Amy Wax was saying. Basically, it's the idea of cultural compatibility, the idea of allegiance, right? When we were talking about allowing people in. And as an immigrant, yes, you get asked a whole bunch of questions about, well, are you a member? Have you ever been part of this or part of that? They make you swear an oath when you do when you become a citizen, right? Me, I had to swear an oath, right? So the question of allegiance is not crazy. So when ADOS or FBA talk about the allegiance that they should should or should not expect from certain immigrants, are they out of line?
Um, I mean, yeah, it's like it's interesting. It's like I mean, if you're from somewhere, you're going to have a different sort of context for the place you live in, and so you may or may not you probably will be willing to deal with more stuff that is not, you know, that's either not good stuff, or there's obvious issues with it, but you just accept it as, hey, this is how it's always been. My parents dealt with this, my grandparents dealt with this, all of that kind of thing. Whereas someone that is from somewhere else, uh, they're probably not going to deal with that stuff. They're probably going to say, okay, I'll do whatever the contract says, whatever the agreement is, whatever the commitment is. But a lot of this extra stuff, I'm probably not going to deal with that. And so if people are expecting that folks from somewhere else that become citizens are supposed to be willing to deal with the same, goofy stuff, historical stuff, then that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. I wouldn't do it either. In fact, it may actually be a good idea for folks that are from here to kind of look at the way that some immigrants come here, and maybe that helped them to see maybe in their blind spots. Maybe you've been accepting stuff that you shouldn't be accepting.
Hmm.
That kind of thing.
Shout out to the super chat, or is it a super sticker? Whatever it is very much appreciated. I got to work on the volume of my round of applause, but I believe Deary, is that the name?
I
Yes.
think it's Deanie.
Oh, my bad. Yeah, I'm kind of blind. Now we also have J Bones in the building. Okay, J Bones holding it down with the $2 super sticker saying cool. Thank you very much, J Bones. Your contributions are well appreciated. Now you say expecting a certain kind of allegiance. Okay, how about cultural compatibility? Okay, is there? Well, let me back up and let me ask you this quick question. Where does immigration lie in your stack of, shall we say, pet policies, right? Somewhere in the middle, high up there, what and why? Like, where is immigration for you?
Well, I mean, theoretically, we should be maximizing our own population before opening the doors, as it were. We should be supporting our own folks before we welcome others to come in. Kind of get your own house in order, kind of thing. But there are a lot of jobs that we just don't have we don't have enough people with the kind of expertise, and that's why some of these what is it, like the H-1B or whatever, that's why they are
Let me
always. Yeah.
let me play. I'm gonna actually play devil's advocate, but in actually real life, that I am gonna advocate, because I'm someone who hires people internationally, right?
Right.
So the thing is this: there's a marketplace out there, right? And when it comes down to follow the money. Okay. Whenever you hear somebody say, well, we can't really find the right people here, but there's an obvious economic incentive for why you're making the decision. And it doesn't, what they may just be saying, wah, wah, wah. It doesn't matter what they're saying. Okay. And I'm saying this as somebody that does that. There's a marketplace, and when you can get cheaper labor, then and if you're big enough where you can then influence policy, the reasons that you give the people when you lobby them and bribe them is just say, it's because we can't find enough Americans to fill these positions. We have to get them from India, right? In other words, don't you question that whole thing that because again,
Oh yeah.
I know it.
Oh, definitely. I know there's a lot of okey doke going on with that. I know that there are more people available for certain kind of positions than they act like there are. I know that to be the case, or there are things that you can do here to incentivize and promote, the idea of folks pursuing certain kinds of degree programs that would fill some of these needs. But the reason they don't do that is there's no reason for them to do that. There's no incentive for them to do that. They can get it cheaper elsewhere. So that is true. But there also is a sort of, what are you going to do right now sort of problem. So say if there is only a certain number of folks with certain capability, then I'm okay with opening the doors to folks that have those skills. I'm okay with that theoretically. Now, if it's sort of trumped up and they're making stuff up, obviously that's a separate issue. It's related, but it's separate to my point. I just think, do what you can do to maximize what you already have, rather than spending money elsewhere. Try to spend as much money as you can here. Keep the money in the country, as it were. That's always going to end up being better for the people that live here.
Okay. So the things you're saying are right along in terms of certain trends. Now, you know that certain things are moving when, quote unquote, big picture right and big picture left kind of tend to agree on a particular direction. It is worth noting. And the direction is that kind of nativism to America. The left is saying it for one reason, right? Like, and the right is saying, no, they're taking our jobs generally. The left is saying, stay out of the world's, stop policing the world and doing all that kind of stuff, right? Focus on America, right? So, but both sides are doing that, in moving the country in a particular direction. It is inevitably going there for other reasons anyways. But let me play, good response to generally what we've put on the table, which is, what are the terms cultural compatibility and what does it mean to you? And then this allegiance question, is it crazy? Well, I think you answered it in terms of, let's say the ADOS, right? But should a country, right, expect a certain kind of allegiance, cultural or political compatibility with them in terms of letting them in? You can bring it down to okay, cool. Okay, so you agree with that?
Yeah, I was kind of giving a little maybe more nuance in my answer to that question earlier. But the basic answer is yes. So for instance, the country, I'm sorry, the language that is spoken, you should expect that people prioritize the English language if they're going to be here. That is the language of the United States of America. So when folks come here and they still don't speak English for, 5 years, 10 years, they're still here and they still don't hardly speak any English, can't write English and all like that, I think there's a problem with that. Also, if they're coming here and they already have a sort of disdain for sort of a meritocracy. So they're kind of coming here with the whole, the government should be taking care of us. government should be giving us handouts. The government should be X, Y, and Z. Socialism is actually a better way. All of like that. If that's where they're coming with, I think you can stay somewhere else with that.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
it's not that that kind of ideology doesn't really help America per se.
Gotcha. So you've put down some political stipulations, some even cultural or even moral things that you're allowed to ask with regards to the people you're letting in. Okay.
Right.
So let us see. And before I'm going to ask you that thing about owing and what exactly then should be what African Americans, if you will, want. What would be their interest if they were at the table, right? And being able to, put the contract for Black America, whatever it may be, up front and say, well, what would be the immigration platform of that particular, or immigration plank of that particular platform? But anyways, let me play this a little bit more.
These are not, these are not original ideas on the right, but unfortunately, I said this might result in a shift in the racial profile of people come in. We'll obviously have fewer people from Africa. We'll have fewer people from some parts of Asia, and it'll be more white. Not that many white people want to come to the United States. And this is what made the headlines. Amy Wax advocates for, excluding people of color from immigration, which of course isn't what I said at all. I said this might be the result, and therefore conservatives might be nervous about it. I was talking about what conservatives are willing to advocate. And, conservatives are very skittish about racial effects. In fact, that's something in the essays that I sent to you that I've written about, that one of the reasons fighting wokeness is so difficult, I think, and there's been so little success, and there have been pockets of success. We can talk about the school wars, is because conservatives are so confused and ambivalent about the whole disparate impact, equal results phenomenon. And that I think is a problem on the right. People need to get their head on straight that under current conditions, if they're going to go back to colorblindness, if they're going to go back to impartiality and, the classic meritocracy, we are not going to see proportional outcomes.
Yeah, hold on, Amy. I actually agree with that, and I want to talk about that. But I want to just ask you a question about this point about immigration, because I'm noticing that a large number of the immigrants who are coming from some parts of the non-Western world are doing quite well. I mean, I'm noticing that South Asians, for example, are all over the tech industries. I'm noticing that the East Asian first and second generation immigrants, from Korea, from China, are doing very well. And if you were to rank different ethnic groups by, income or occupational status or whatever, you'd find a number of non-Western immigrant populations, doing quite well in terms of wealth and PhDs and, so forth and so on. So non-Western is a pretty broad category, and the cultural characteristics of some of these immigrants. So that's one point, that some immigrants are doing quite well who are not from the West. The other point, though, is that it's very selective who decides to come. And even if I come from what Donald Trump called a shithole country, even if I come from a place that's not at all doing well, I might be an individual who, in virtue of electing to get the heck out.
Okay. We know the concept is called immigrant pluck, meaning, the immigrant is not just some random pick, right?
Yep.
Of any population, right? They're a specific type of person. So,
Yep.
and I tend to agree with that. But I think that Glenn Lowry's pushback on the whole cultural thing, what do you feel about it? In other words, she's saying that, look, this kind of Western stuff you're talking about, the world is more technocratic these days, and it's about who can get the job done and blah, blah, blah. I don't think that's Lowry's position, but he did kind of lay that out there. That's worthy of note, but I think we have a guest in the building, if I read that correctly.
Yeah, who we have?
How's it going? Long time no see.
Oh, it's It's Lion Legal.
Yeah.
I think I'm-
In the flesh, in the golden flesh, I should say,
Lion Legal in the golden
of the
flesh.
lion's mane, of the lion's mane. Yeah. How are
Okay,
you?
so we're doing well now. I'm sure you have something to contribute, but let me ask you a question. Where is immigration for you in terms of policy? And you might be an immigrant yourself from one place to the other. But in terms of policy importance, is it high for you? And then you can also contribute or ask what you were going to ask.
On a personal level, I'm not sure it's the first thing which most people think about, because they think about the personal issues, economic issues, and how they're able to provide for their own families. However, it depends on who you are, because just as the clip that you played before stated, even if you come from a different country, not everybody experiences the same thing. They may come abroad and they're coming abroad for education. Some people will come abroad or go to different countries because they're trying to escape dire economics or social conditions. So basically, typically it's not what I would consider the most pressing issue, but I think it's an important issue. But if we're talking about the policy of a country, absolutely it's an important issue, because it's an issue that it's best to get right to ensure that you're able to absorb people coming in and to make them feel comfortable in a way that will enrich the tapestry of life that goes on in that particular country.
How well is American doing, by the way? Just a quick follow-up question on that, because you probably,
Sure.
again, what is your judgment as to how America absorbs versus compared to other people in the real world, not compared to heaven?
I'll tell you this. If you look at the biggest corporations in America, a lot of those are run by people that have been able to come into the States and take advantage of the American dream. Rarely are you going to find that kind of example anywhere else in the world, on the planet. There are other countries where simply by your background, the language you speak, the religion you practice, you will never be given an opportunity to do anything at all. America is the complete opposite. Even if it only has that image, even if there are a lot of difficulties there, I don't think anybody can say that it's impossible to make it in America. And as far as the way that countries in general treat immigrants, I would say America strives to accept people from different countries, although maybe they fall short of their ideals in certain ways, but at least the expectation is there.
Okay, go ahead. Now, what did you have in mind when you came on the panel?
What I have in mind, what's your view on this? Because it seems that you may have a different view than me. I can read body language, so yeah.
No. Okay. So the question was how important immigration is to you, right? And on one end, I'll get to how America is doing very quickly. But I agree with you that basically, personally, not very high up there, even though I'm an immigrant myself, right? Then the question of how America is doing, what I'll have to say is that to mention, like I had the lead attorney on at some point in the past few months.
I can't stand that guy. That guy.
I know you like personal beefs, Lion Legal, and that's why you're exciting. But you know how I am. I don't do that person stuff.
Okay,
what we were discussing, the idea was that he was talking about how good the American legal system is compared to Mexico, another place where he's familiar with, right? So in other words, as an immigrant, immigrants tend to know something about America, which a lot of Americans may take for granted, which is that the legal system, top notch, that respect for the law stuff, of course it's not perfect, but compared to what, right? Compared to El Salvador? Where are you trying to go here? And also upward mobility and certain other things like that absorbing of the immigrant population, not saying, hey, because how does one ever become a Frenchman, really? No, You're either French or not. There's no French Barack Obama, right? That kind of an idea there. So I agree with you on that. If that is your question. Now, Dr. Thunder, okay, you see what Lion Legal has to say there about like how well America is doing in regards to immigration policy. Do you share that thought? Or
Yeah, I mean, America is the I mean, it's the best place as far as the way that it treats folks that come in. That's definitely true. Maybe it doesn't live up to its ideals. That's true. Maybe we could be better, but to your point, in comparison to what? I mean, there's no match for America. So there's not really anything for us to compare ourselves to. There's not like a better standard for us to compare ourselves to. Okay, so that's so I would say that. Now, that being said, and actually, if you can put Kareen's comment back up there. First of all, thanks for supporting the show, Kareen. Kareen says with the $5, it looks like a super sticker. Very much appreciated. If you can put the comment back up there.
Yeah, I'll put the comment back up as well. I believe this
So,
is the comment.
Yeah, that comment. So a couple things. See, one issue is that.
Do you mind reading the comment?
I will in a second. I'm gonna work it into what I'm gonna say. So one of the issues is we have this idea that in itself diversity is some sort of positive thing. And it is not. Okay. Well, the only thing that makes unity is actually what's valuable. Now, if you can take people that from different places and different perspectives, and you can get them to agree on a core set of principles, those things that unite, then you can benefit from the diversity, so to speak. But diversity for diversity's sake is not a positive thing. That's like a negative thing, actually, because it breeds division. You can't get together on anything. You can't go in any particular direction because nobody agrees on even basic, principles. The value systems are all over the place. Whose value system are we going to go with? You end up with all of this kind of stuff. So a lot of times you hear people talk about, the value of diversity and stuff like this, and it's a bunch of hogwash. And it's just a bunch of garbage talk.
It's interesting that
I would like to push back on that.
Okay, wait, hold on 1 second. And it's interesting that what you're saying, the woke also realize this in terms of that it's not about diversity, it's about having people all together with the same message, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
They too are not looking for, but
yeah.
Go ahead, and then we'll let Lion Legal respond to what you're saying.
Right. So, in academia, they play this game often, right? So they say, oh yeah, we want everybody here. We want people from all these other places and like this, and we were going to celebrate other people's viewpoints and like this and their cultures and stuff like this. And that's hogwash. That's not what actually is happening. What they do is they get people that look different, but they say the same things. Right. They're very much in control of the kinds of things. I mean, they have a particular thing that they want the people to say. And so on its face, though there's all of this celebration of diversity, in one sense, the folks that are championing this diversity, they themselves don't actually value diversity in that sense. They just want it to look like, say, look, I see churches do this all the time. Like church, oh yeah, we represent over 100 countries. There's people that come to our church over 100 countries. I don't care about that. What I care about is how much of the influence of those other countries is actually visible, is actually present. It's the same issue that I have with the multiculturalism talking points. It's like, okay, that sounds good, but what actually ends up happening is a particular perspective ends up prevailing. So you have the folks that are behind behind the curtain, and they all look the same, came from the same place, like this. And so they end up deciding what aspects of other people's cultures they're going to promote. So then it ends up being the same thing again.
So Lion Legal, real quick, okay, and again, Dr. Thunder is basically saying, look, pragmatically, politically, it doesn't work. It's just a sham, regardless of what the ideal may be. And I don't know where your pushback was, but real quick, the pushback, and then we have a couple people waiting in the back to.
Yeah, the pushback is the notion that diversity for diversity's sake is not good enough. It absolutely is, because you have to be exposed to a diverse tapestry of ideas, of views. It doesn't matter.
Why we're changing the definition of diversity and then trading over each other. So basically, if that's your definition of diversity, then I don't think Dr. Thunder is going to disagree. Dr. Thunder said that's not, they're just looking for people who look different, but they say the same things, right? I believe that was the first, about the one of the first few sentences. So with that, Lion Legal, isn't that what is the truth, that you just find a Chinese guy to say the same thing that the black guy is saying, that the woman is saying, that, and then you just show your diversity face?
Here's the difficulty. What is the prevailing view in that particular country that they come from? How do you know that they're saying things which are the same as they may say in the States, but would be different from what they would say if they were back home? And how do you know that is not the consensus in their own country too?
Yeah. So Dr. Thunder, this is a very good point, because I think it goes to what Karine said earlier. In other words, there are a diversity of views. There is no particular group which is a monolith, right? You say, okay, African Americans are not a monolith, so maybe immigrants are also not a monolith. Hence, but
you know the difference, though.
Go ahead.
You know why those aren't the same? The reason they're not the same is if you are if we're talking about immigration, then you get to choose the people that come in. You get to set policy that decides, that makes certain decisions about what kinds of folks that you want to bring in. Okay. And that's different from people that are already here having different views. So if they can have whatever views they want to. You have people that here that are total, slum buckets. We're not going to invite slum buckets in. I mean, hopefully we're not going to allow that to be the kind of people that we want to bring in. So you establish what the criteria is, and I think that's a positive thing. Now, yeah, I don't think that the people that we say, hey, come on in, that they need to be all in lockstep and they need to be robots and all saying exactly the same things. And in fact, if you try to create a system that just basically normalizes or determines these sort of talking points that the folks need to say in order to get in, people are just going to learn those talking points, and you're not going to know who they actually are. So I think you have a problem there.
Let me exercise my moderator privileges over here, because I think we can get boggled down the rabbit hole of political correctness / wokeness / postmodern whatever with this particular line of conversation. But we have Game Changer, and do you mind introducing yourself? I could introduce you.
Was that directed to me or Game Changer? I guess everyone knows who Game Changer is.
That's directed to you. Everyone knows who Game
Am I coming
Changer
in clear? Because I'm on a Bluetooth.
Yeah, we see you.
And we hear you good too.
Yeah, we hear you.
Right. Yeah, I'm Dean, Deanie, is my nickname. Yeah, new to your panel. I've seen your lead attorney interview. I liked that interview a lot, like lead attorney. Yeah, so I'm just kind of new to your panel, but I have some interesting thoughts on this
Go
topic.
ahead.
So, because we kind of started drifting away from the direct ADOS allegiance to start talking about an American allegiance. And in general, I think that when immigrants come here, there's a strong necessity to assimilate, but still preserve culture. You know, they
Right.
have their own cultures and their own affinity groups, like Jamaica. In New York, they have Jam Car. We celebrate Caravana, for example. So you still preserve your culture, but there's still a strong need to assimilate. And the perfect examples for this would be someone like a Barack Obama, who is first generation, second generation, depending on your perspective. You know, for the longest time, he went by Barry. This is a very, very common thing that immigrants with ethnic names do. Nimrata Haley went by Nikki Haley. You know, Bobby Jindal. You know, the list goes on. So I don't see Asians coming in changing American culture because of the necessity to assimilate.
Hmm.
Hey, I have to split.
Okay.
My son is waiting for us to start the Super Bowl festivities,
Hey,
so I need
nice.
to split. But I'll see everybody next week. Thanks for coming up, folks. Good to see you in here, Game Changer. See you later, Ike.
All right. Peace. Be safe out there. Okay, and we'll get to you, Game Changer, in a second. However, with regards to the need to assimilate, there's something I want to perhaps add to that. There's something I like to talk about, which is the inferiority complex and the overcompensation when we talk about both individuals and groups. So the immigrant, okay, comes over from wherever they come over from, okay? And they know that the native population always has this one trump card, okay? There's always one last attack. They always have the last word, which is, well, why don't you go back, okay? Or why don't you do this over in your country? That kind of a thing. Game Changer knows what I'm talking about. He probably says that kind of crap, you know, with his bigoted, anyways.
Yeah, we get together and, you know, we drink from a jug with an XXX on it and talk about immigrants. Yeah.
There you go. So the immigrant knows that. He's also immediately a minority within a minority sometimes. And there is a need to establish yourself. And also then it's almost like you're proving yourself to the establishment, because the establishment is what brought you in. And it turns out that to the eyes of some natives, the establishment is the white man or something. So you're pledging your allegiance to the white man, as opposed to with us. But you see, that sets in a sense of inferiority, and a sense of inferiority. Things are dialectic, right? It's not like it ends there. There's also a sense of superiority that comes on the other side of that coin, right? Which is, you know, well, my culture is the greatest, even though my country is burning right now and I ran away. But oh, my hard work, my culture, my this, whatever it may be. So, and then the same thing happens also, let's say, on the ADOS side, where there's a both inferiority and superiority game going, and they throw these bombs at each other. So I think that the point that you bring up about the need to assimilate by these immigrant groups, not causing it, you know, but here's something that they did say, and maybe you'll have a comment for this, Dean, before we go to Game Changer. The idea is that one of the ideas Amy Wax was saying is that, look, that the Asian, and this is Amy Wax now, not me, the Asian population is a little too docile and goes along with goes along to get along, such that they're just taking whole cloth, this woke type of stuff, and that's what they're just so that they can get along, right? That there's not enough of the American spirit or whatever. Now she may be completely making it up, I don't know, right? But what do you have to say about that, Dean? That this is the danger from her point of view, that there's not enough of that American rugged individualism in them, that they're just going to go with one particular line, if you will. Any thoughts on that?
So I call bullshit on that, and I honestly understand the thought process. That's like a trope, a very common trope. The docile Asian immigrant who just, I don't want no twabble, right? That's like the common stereotype that they say. But it's a new, you know, this is not the 70s. There's a new breed of Asian immigrants, and Asia's not a monolith, you know. Like I guess maybe if she's referring to, I don't know. I call
This
bullshit.
particular, yeah, she would localize it more, but still, I think your bullshit calling is still applicable regardless of.
Yeah,
what you're-
and I wanted to touch base on the allegiance. What do immigrants owe ADOS and FBA because I don't
Yeah.
want to lose that because that was a very 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 provocative title.
Mhm. Yeah.
And you know, like to answer that question, so I call bullshit on what she's saying there. You don't become one of the founders of Google being docile. I promise you. So, but in terms of what the allegiance, someone like myself or yourself or any type of immigrant owes FBA or ADOS, I say that there is somewhat of an allegiance, right? You pledge allegiance to the flag, but
Mhm.
you opened up about how the ADOS FBA have been active in the civil rights and making a better union. And I think that's where the immigrants can have some sense of allegiance following that tradition. And it's not a new tradition. This is a tradition that's been in existence since the beginning. Unpopular opinion: Malcolm X is not FBA ADOS. Louis Farrakhan is not FBA ADOS. You know, there's been a long tradition of when you get into this country, still fighting for a better union. That doesn't necessarily mean putting ADOS down. They might sometimes communications might be misinterpreted, and there's some sensitivities there where people feel like they're stepping on each other's toes. But that would be the only thing that I would owe is continuing that tradition.
Hmm. Yeah, and thank you for picking that thread up, because I think that's the beam that undergirds this whole conversation, right? And I laid it all down there basically. Well, borders are a thing, immigration policy is a thing. There's a constituent group in the United States that have contributed a lot, and they have, just like any other group in a democratic society, have interest immigration wise, and they have the right to say it, right? And to the degree to which immigrants are grateful to the country, then they have to be grateful to everyone that made it part of what it is. So that makes sense. Now, game changer, what do immigrants, or African immigrants even, owe the FBA ADOS community? Tell us. Nothing.
Nothing at all. An African immigrant owes us nothing. You know, because they never really took anything from us. So why do they owe us anything? You know, always is, you owe people something for one of two reasons. One, a person has taken something from another. Two, a person has loaned or given something. Like I owe you a favor, like, like Ike, I owe you a dinner or something like that. But realistically, no, we don't owe, or excuse me, African immigrants do not owe African Americans whose ancestry extends for centuries, don't owe us anything.
Okay, let me ask you now,
Yeah.
game changer. Two quick questions. The first one is, where does immigration rank in terms of your pet policies? And then number two, to the degree to which you are an African American, right, and you're a community-minded type of person,
Yes.
what should be the African American position, or maybe it's game changer's position, vis-a-vis the African American plight when it comes to immigration? What do African Americans want, right? What would benefit African Americans when it comes to immigration?
Well, I think far too many of us don't want to compete with the best and brightest of the how can I say, intercontinental immigrants. And by that, I mean people who come here through hand-selected processes like H-1B, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We don't want them type of problems. I mean, we don't mind somebody hopping over the border for, for a job that most Americans would much rather not work at. However, once they start sending over the engineers from Nigeria and things like that, then things start to get complicated. So I do think that we want less competition. However, I think that that competition is going to be here whether we want it or not. That's just an unfortunate, that's just an unfortunate byproduct of globalization.
So, Dean, competition and not wanting it. Okay, when it's placed that way, to my ears, it sounds like the particular representation, that has a negative connotation to it. But you're basically just saying you're trying to control a certain kind of flow, a certain kind of trade within your borders. That's what it means to have a border. Okay. So, well, this much of this, not that much of that, none of X, whatever, right? So is it fair for African Americans to say, hey, you know what? We don't want this particular, whatever it is that you guys are doing, Mr. Immigration Policy United States, this particular group of people you're letting in is messing up our program. Is that not a fair
That
comment?
is, especially if you come from the standpoint that you're bringing in a group of people that are producing a thing that they don't consume.
Yeah, let me get Dean there. Let's get an immigrant point of view there, and then I have something for you, game changer.
Okay.
So and this is going to sound terrible, but I don't know if that question is just lands squarely on at the feet of FBA or ADOS. They don't have the authority. I know that they say they speak very loud, but I don't necessarily think they have the authority to dictate immigration policy. If I'm not mistaken, ADOS and FBA are not even political groups.
Mm-hmm.
Do I have that right or wrong?
So they're ethnic groups.
Yeah. So I can't even really answer that question when there's not even any political action
that is an interesting thing to state. You're being quite empirical. Well, the facts on the ground, sir. There's nothing to see. So what am I commenting on? What I'm saying is, let's say hypothetically, is it a priori false that a community can say, I don't want this type of immigrant coming in because it's messing, by false I mean, is it wrong, right? It's messing up my particular economy here, right? Because corporations can say it. Corporations can say this or this much tariff, that much tax, blah, blah, blah. So does that change anything, Dean?
I would say you're absolutely right. Groups do can express, what they would like to see in policy. But if these two groups, FBA and ADOS, were really interested in seeing those policy changes, they would be a political action committee. And I had a question for Game Changer, because I do think that immigrants do owe some type of allegiance in terms of carrying the tradition. When you move into certain communities, because you were talking about communities, like when you do move into certain communities or neighborhoods, and picket fences, all the lawns are immaculate. Sometimes they have an HOA, sometimes they don't. But if you do move into that neighborhood, there's an expectation for you to carry on. I'll just call it a tradition, for what that community is doing in terms of upkeeping the house and everything like that. So that's where I that's where I think that there is a legitimate case to be made that, hey, we've been doing this and it's paved the way for you to come into this community. The expectations are for you to continue to do what was done to facilitate you coming in. It's not saying that because I don't think that they're solely responsible, but the actions in combination with other groups, because it wasn't just ADOS, helped to facilitate the immigration. So who would I be? What type of jerk would I be to say, build a wall? Well, I'll take that back because that's a different issue. That's illegal immigration. What kind of jerk would I be to say, just eliminate immigrants altogether? That there would be some type of cognitive dissonance involved there. So that's so Game Changer just like that's just my perspective on the, I guess, allegiance that immigrants should have.
I get what you're saying. We have a different definition of what allegiance is, because what you're describing to me is more like when in Rome, do what the Romans do. That's not really an immigrant group giving something to another group or paying homage to, us providing civil rights that, future groups benefit from. That's not anything. That's just really just like this, not disrupting an existing culture, and the absence of a negative is not, owing somebody, or it's not paying something to someone. It's, an immigrant of any type isn't losing out by doing that. They're just, they're just making it comfortable for both cultures to coexist, which I believe any group should. If I were to immigrant to, say, Cameroon, I would do the same. And it's not because I feel like I owe Cameroonians anything, because we are both of post-nomadic African descent. I would just, because I want their society to function, because I want to live in a functional society.
Okay. So you say no, nothing is owed,
No.
and you have not stipulated what the you basically say no, we don't. And I think that Dean also said, that ADOS doesn't have the power. There should be a political action committee, such and such and such, right?
Well, there are.
If they were serious about it, I can't take anyone serious if they're going to say we have no leader, we're not politically active, and we're just gonna just sit and scream all day. Like I got no time for that.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. See, we just don't act in an inconsistent manner. So, we are politically active, but we have been voting and, behaving in politics consistently for several decades. In fact, since we have the right to do so. However, immigration is the culture can be rallied to a particular cause, and, anti-immigration is one of those causes. It hasn't been, and this isn't, a cultural threat or anything like that, but I would not undermine the ability for, any minority group to influence the people in power.
Okay, so Game Changer, you talked about competition earlier.
Mhm.
You compete, okay, and then when you start talking about negatives and the absence of a negative and blah blah blah, I'm like, oh, here you go, Mr. Program guy. But you compete with these what's a B? What it's B1 visas? What are those visas?
B visas. It's basically a way for, yeah.
Okay. So in the tech world that you're in,
Mhm.
what has your experience been with regards to this particular block of competition? Did you notice an increase, an influx? Has it affected you in any ways, or just from observation?
I kind of graduated into that world, so I don't really have a basis of comparison. I will say that that if this program didn't exist, then there wouldn't. Then I would probably make maybe like 3 times what I do. However, the technical infrastructure that we have wouldn't exist. My class was, I would say, maybe 80 to 90% both African and Indian immigrant, and so yeah, I mean, Americans just don't want to, quite frankly. So I mean, yeah, I mean, it would make individuals like myself, natural born, naturalized citizens of the U.S. I would have my pick of jobs out there. However,
Let me put something on the table, which is a little bit psychological, if you will.
Mhm.
So there's the top layer. The top layer is this: when you have a native population that shares some kind of genetic or ethnic resemblance with some immigrant population. So you have native-born Mexicans versus Mexicans immigrating from Mexico, native-born Chinese versus. So on that surface level, there's always a little bit more animosity, in the same way that this family is always bickering back and forth with each other. There's a struggle. It's some kind of weird identity struggle going on there.
Mhm.
Okay. But also, a layer below, still goes this crazy thought in my head that perhaps there's something more that the African American expects from the African in particular that is more than whatever beef an American-born Chinese may have with a Chinaman. Now, Game Changer and then Dean. Game Changer, you see where I'm going here with this or no?
I think you're trying to hint at something. I don't really believe in that and don't care. I mean, if anything, a Mexican immigrant, has closer ties to their country because they've been here for fewer generations. I don't even know the countries from which I descended from in West Africa. So, what right would I have to make any demands or requirements from an ancestry that's been long lost?
Okay, Game Changer does not. But however, do you see that this may be part of what some other people are doing there? In other words, they're expecting a little bit of, you gotta connect with us. We're the vanguard over here, African Americans, and we're bringing you whatever it may be, some kind of predetermined relationship already with the heritage and all that good stuff. Is that part of what's going on here?
Yeah, it is. I mean, and I understand that those people exist, but I mean, the question is why? Like, why do you want? Why should they have to? I don't think that they're morally obligated. I most certainly know that they're not legally obligated. So, we as African Americans, we have to create a situation where people want to work with us in those regards, not have to. I mean, so an immigrant from Africa comes with the skills that qualifies them to be an immigrant. Because let's be clear, the lottery system, in my opinion, it's not a coincidence. Why are how come we don't get the panhandlers through that lottery system? We always seem to get the engineers and nurses and doctors and stuff like that. So, it's not a coincidence. But the thing is that they come with particular skill sets to offer. What do we offer them? And if you do offer them something, then that's great. Then it's a mutual exchange and we can work together. But to hope that's charity, that's not really a cultural exchange.
Okay, so Dean, do you see there being any special demands, requests, longings from the African American side with regards to certain, the African diaspora, like immigrants from Africa and the Caribbean?
Yeah, I think it's I like this conversation. Like building you talking about building like having a black nation essentially, and the Jews have the law of return. It's called I think Aliyah or something like that, and it's not even anything that's demanded. It's expected. Israel allows for Jews of the diaspora to return back to Israel. It would be a beautiful thing if either in Nigeria, Ghana, or whichever West African nation had a similar setup.
Ghana does.
So I what's that?
Ghana does.
Mm-hmm.
They do. That's right.
The year of return and all that return stuff.
Yeah. That's something relatively new, though, right? Within the last 10 years.
Yeah, it is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, however, it's not old to us. It's appreciated by us and those who did immigrate to Ghana. But I don't think it's that's old. It's just something that's appreciated. But I do think that they understand that those who are capable of expatting the U.S. Do bring a skill set and an income or something. They don't just go there, with their pants sagging down, asking for money. So, I mean, it is an exchange. They get some of our, pretty sure, engineer, doctors, teachers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, and in exchange, we get a place where we are free from systemic racism.
I don't see a problem with that, Game Changer. I don't know if you see a problem with that or.
I don't see a problem with that. It's an exchange. I'm all for exchange. I'm not for charity. Charity weakens the society.
Right. But
Mhm.
it's I don't look at it as charity. I look at it as, like I said, nation building.
No, no, that's what I'm
Um,
saying. In the case of Ghana, it's an exchange, because the
yeah.
people who are going there are going to there to build the nation. They're not going there for welfare. So like it's an exchange.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with their policy, but if 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 ADOS or if ADOS people are making that comment, I don't see. I understand. I guess I could see where they're coming from with that.
Dean, let's take the conversation because and you guys answered well in terms of I went down a psychological speculation there as to expecting something. I think that we understood the fact that we were able to recognize the specter that I was bringing up was important. Now let's go back in another direction in terms of the certain kinds of active friction, the things that people say on the surface to each other. Now, along with that immigrant sense of inferiority just because minority left somewhere, the majority or the or your host society always has the hey, what are you doing here, or why don't you go do it somewhere else kind of card, and all that kind of stuff. I mentioned also that there is a side which then holds on to something about you or your homeland that is kind of superior, and you two will play some kind of generalization on the other end as well. Maybe I'll ask start with game changer on this one. Now, what exactly is it that the African immigrant community, okay,
Mhm.
is saying? What are the things you hear out there that are kind of like maybe they need to stop saying that or stop having that attitude, or maybe that's not the best way to express X, Y, or Z, right? Um, so what are those things, whether they affect you, game changer, or not? I'm just asking you to be a reporter now as to what you have seen out there.
Um, I haven't really seen too much. I mean, that's bad coming from African immigrants. The first large group of African immigrants that I met was, I was at Nesby, and so there's that, and I can tell that
Are
they,
we all engineers here?
yeah,
Seems
I
that
think
way. Yeah.
one form or
Uh,
another.
awesome.
Yeah, so that was my first interaction with a large group. So that's the sample population. Now they had their bias, and some of it is true that we're loud, impulsive, and in some cases violent. And that really didn't affect business relationships, but it did affect interpersonal relationships. In fact, there was a time when I actually had to drop a girl off down the street because her father didn't want her to mess with Black Americans. So, and she was Ethiopian. So, there is a there, but as far as just like general negative perceptions of us, yeah, I think a lot of it comes from the media that they watch, and it's up to us to change that narrative for them.
Okay. Something that you mentioned there just brings to mind that that this is perhaps a couple of decades prior would have just been seen as part of what you deal with as a human being, right? What is the name of that mob movie where the Italian kid is dating the black girl, right? You're a movie buff, Mr. Game Changer, so you probably know what I'm talking about.
A Brooklyn Tale, I think that's what you're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah, that one. So it's like, yeah, people don't like, the Irish don't want the Italians, and it's like it's just normal. If you're
Mhm.
gonna be going over there to that side of town, you got to sneak in, and her dad is not gonna want to see you around. That kind of a thing. But I think that's a good answer to the question. Now let me ask you, Dean. Same question on the table, right? What are some of the things that immigrant groups, or some of the ways in which maybe they're spreading certain kinds of invective or stereotypes, whatever it may be, attitudes perhaps that they have that they can change, that will make it better overall for this nation building you refer to?
So there, I don't want to necessarily like, throw my culture under the bus, so to speak, but there are some negative perceptions sometimes of like the older. people. You know, like sometimes are you looking for examples, or are you just saying like are you saying do I acknowledge that they exist?
A, you acknowledge that they exist. I think you've already done that much. Well, then B, it's like, well, you can either give particular examples or you can talk about classes of them, and that ways in which perhaps maybe you could explain them, or ways in which that they could change, or do they actually affect the relationship,
Okay.
that kind of a thing.
Okay. So so I won't go into any examples, but I think that with time it is getting better, especially as um, as generations immigrate and start um, assimilating and intermixing with you know the people in America, and then you have that cultural type of mixing, swirling kind of going on. So I think just naturally it's going to happen. Um, Now there's some pros and cons with that because you don't want to take on some of the negative. But I take that back. Um, uh, I'm trying to.
Basically, you know,
Yeah.
if there is such a thing as culture, then it has an identity, and then, you know, if you start putting peas in your, you know, goat soup, it's not goat soup anymore,
Yeah.
and for you to exist, you have to be goat soup. You can't exist as a kind of weird mix between pea, goat soup, blah blah. So
Yeah.
you're good.
Yeah, and you know, it's like so these topics can be very very sensitive, and sometimes when things are said, it's not meant to be malicious. But yeah, it definitely when it comes to immigrants who come here, um, that's why I say you know it's good for them, for us to continue that tradition of fighting for a better civil union because um, you know like Jamaica's got its issues. You know, like I'm not going to romanticize and say that you know
Mhm.
oh our culture is better because of this or our culture is better because of that. And that stuff I used to have that I used to talk like that and it was foolish. Every culture and the more you travel you see this every culture has its has their class issues going on.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Yeah, there's a question on the. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the super chat. Okay. I suspect that is who I think. No, that's Mr. Awesome. Okay. Says, is the US importing brain power, right? Instead of cultivating it? Why or why not? Now,
Oh,
go, were you gonna say something, Game Changer?
oh no, I was going to answer that question because yeah.
Well, go ahead. Go ahead, answer it.
Well, no, I mean it's an emphatic yes.
Okay.
It is, and that's because the U.S. citizens have become complacent in its prosperity. So yeah, in fact, our children have learned that here in the U.S. You can move further with creative potential or entertainment than you can with brain power. A pretty woman here in the U.S. can make a lot more than a intelligent man in the U.S. That's just the way it is. Or an entertainer, or an athlete or something like that can prosper far greater than an intellectual. That's just the nation that we live in. However, we're very unique in that regard. There aren't many people in less prosperous countries where oh, because you can sing or you can dance or something like that, you out earn a doctor. That's not necessarily the case in other places. So the youth, as a result, is kind of pushed in that direction to maximize their intellectual potential and their academic potential. So yeah, we find it very difficult to compete. I mean,
Okay.
there aren't young Indian boys and from the country of India, with hoop dreams. It just isn't.
Okay, you would say that. Okay, well, that's a good kind of just statement of your position there. Can we get a statement of your position, Dean, on this question? as to importing versus cultivating brain power?
Well, I like that train of thought that Game Changer was going on there. I was thinking maybe that movie, with the Slumdog Millionaire, maybe that would be like the equivalent of Hoop Dream type of thing.
Well, that's a lottery.
But
That's not like your
yeah,
entertainment.
I was just being, I was joking, but
Oh,
because
okay.
I thought what you said was like I couldn't say that, but that was really good. Is the U.S. importing brain power? I think that's part of capitalism. You know, if you if and the evidence speaks for itself. You know, Barack Obama, he's not ADOS. Kamala Harris, she's not ADOS. Colin Powell, not ADOS. Obviously, there are ADOS who are in prominent positions as well, but this is it's a necessity for capitalism to kind of keep the machine going.
Okay, I like that answer. Okay, the economic answer tends to be the most broad and perhaps impersonal explanation, if there is one, and I'll give my answer, to the question. But I like the idea that you kind of just point out that, hey, you know what, there's going to be capitalism. I used it from the first person perspective earlier. I said, hey, I hire engineers, for example. One of my engineers is in Budapest. There's another one in Ethiopia right now. Okay, and the incentives for me to do that need not be anything crazier than I look at what an average engineer earns in Ethiopia and I look at what they earn over here in the Bay, and I'm like, if I can build a machine to get the right type of people with the right personality, train them right, and then do the whole interface thing in terms of online working together. If I get that right, then I have a great competitive advantage. Then I will do that. Then I don't care about whether or not you know, the high school down on Main Street is producing good quality work. I'm already out, right? Now corporations have been out a long time. But anyways, when it comes to the question of why, okay, the beginning answer is what I just said, and what I'm agreeing with you, Dean, is that it's an economic incentive. But there's a bigger economic picture in the sense that the growth that has been promised for the longest time, the bubble is getting bigger and bigger. So after World War II, America's a massive percentage of the whole world GDP. Everyone else is freaking dead anyways. Plus, you know, there are other advantages. And you go from learning how to fly to sending dropping a nuclear bomb within a very short space of time. All these things are happening. Technological, crazy. This cannot go on forever, right? Trees don't grow to the sky, right? They may be growing really fast, but it's going to stop at some point. And I think that there were a lot of institutions that we created promising infinite growth, right? But ultimately being funded by printing of the dollar more so than we've seen before, especially in recent times, right? Is my biggest picture economic explanation, which is the bubble is just getting bigger and you got to find places, you know, scurry away to screw the people. But anyways, now let me see here. I think there are other super chats. There are other super chats, and let me get to those, and then we'll start landing the plane on this conversation. Okay, immigration, after all, is a thing. It is something that you cannot avoid. The ADOS population has made a lot of contributions to what America is. So it, like any other constituent population, has the right to have its say as to what the immigration policy should be. The question now is, well, what should it be, right? And what actually benefits and what doesn't benefit. So shout out to another super chat here.
Yeah. But I personally think that it's not a priority. If it were a priority, it would have been brought to the table. Like I know reparations is a priority.
I see. Okay, now let me see. That's a good point you just brought up, because it's not a priority, doesn't get brought up, but somehow there's all this little skirmish is just kind of behind the scenes, people, you know, talking on the radio and making good media. But shout out to Avery Pierce. That's actually not true. Most productive person in the U.S. is a businessman. I wonder which particular productive. Do
I
you
don't
recall
business
what
is
she?
a broad thing.
Do you know what this person is referring to? Game changer.
Because businessman is such a broad thing,
Yeah.
and also productive kind of implies something is being produced. A lot of businessmen, and this isn't a shot at them, don't really produce anything. It's an exchange of one thing to another. So it's kind of I like to hear more on what you're getting at, but that's that statement alone is very difficult. Like, I mean, really, everyone is in a way a businessman.
Yeah, I wonder in what way we were talking about production and
Right.
identify the most productive person that this person is railing against, but I don't recall that. Kyodor in the building. Thank you very much for the $50 super chat. Always supporting heavy-handedly here. Okay, let's start landing the plane by talking about possible solutions. Okay, so there's a big geopolitical backdrop to all of this. I mentioned an economic aspect, but also, let me put it this way, Game Changer, and then Dean. So when the British show up at your shores with their big guns and their big ship and steel and a regimented, well-trained officer corps, and you're a native population, right? The question is modernize or die, right? So if you're China or if you're Russia, you try to do what you got to do, and then not everybody succeeded. Meiji era Japan kind of did it. So the same thing now. It's more like globalize or die. The corporations made the first move on the chessboard. So same folks have gone out there hiring people, doing immigration policy to benefit them. I argue that you either pick up and globalize with them, right? In other words, you start taking advantage of the international marketplace. After all, this telecommunication and internet and all those kinds of things, right? Get in there, get the bank account over there, look at what's the benefits of getting the passport over there versus a corporate, open up an LLC over there, and you start doing it as well, or it's over for you. So, Game Changer. Those are my final thoughts as to the solution to everything, and then we can kind of talk about particulars and whatnot. But any thoughts about that? Plus, your final thoughts as to the whole solution here. There is a problem. There's immigration. It shows up in economic ways and so on and so forth. Native populations are getting oppressed. What is the individual to do? And I say the individual needs to go out there and globalize. What do you say, Game Changer? And then Dean.
You're referring to like an individual businessman needs to go out and globalize, or are you saying an individual needs to
individual anybody? You, Game Changer, saying, hey, you know what? I need somebody to write a code. I need somebody to do my shopping for me. I need a virtual assistant. I need whatever it may be. You don't have to own a business, right, in order to do that. And also the idea of you just being some kind of an individual rather than taking advantage of corporate personhood, which can also then be easily internationalized, is something that individuals should be doing anyways, right? Okay. You should have an LLC, whether or not you're. Go ahead.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yes, it's unfortunate, but we have become globally competitive. So yes, and if I understand your question correctly, if a citizen of the U.S. Should be willing to open up, even on a small level, to immigrant labor or immigrant intellectual, efforts and things like that, then unfortunately, yes, you can't compete without it. However, in certain areas, I will say that there is an advantage to using American labor and American engineers and things like that. So, if I were in the business of, say, making clothes, then yeah, I probably would not use domestic labor in order to do that. I just wouldn't. It wouldn't be in my best interest to do so. I will say that there are advantages to local engineers as opposed to international engineers, and this isn't a slight at the two of you. Just as far as our work system goes, there are those advantages. Do those advantages really justify the difference in cost? That's yet to be seen. So it's up in the air, but definitely okay, here's the thing, and I know this is a little bit off the question, but I don't want to leave without covering this. Globalization is hurting the developing countries more than it's hurting the U.S. In the long run. So that aspect of it is something that can't be ignored, because the culture that the brother Dean was saying that they're assimilating into is not the culture that built this country. It's the culture of the descendants of those, the culture of people who lived in a developed country, not the same culture of the people who developed the country. It's a huge difference. So you're inheriting a culture of prosperity, sloth, a little bit of laziness and things like that. You're inheriting the very culture that causes us to purchase international brain power. So I want them to be wary of that, and by them I mean international communities. I also want them to understand that you're sending your best and brightest abroad, making it almost completely impossible for the existing nation to develop because your best and brightest are leaving. So that's another problem with globalization. Yeah. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of future problems. However, if we didn't have it, and I do want to respond to MOT, if we didn't have it, then America would just be squashed by its own stupidity and placency.
Shout out to MOT, and yes, you could go ahead and give a quick response to. Go ahead and read what he said, and then give a quick response. Very much appreciated. Thank you for the $20 super chat.
Yeah, it says business. I think you mean businessman manages and direct production employees produce. Exactly. So, and that's what I mean. That's what made the gentleman's question earlier more confusing, because.
And by the way, I think the same person also super chatted again. Maybe they clarified their point. If you could. Shout out to you. Okay, can you read that super chat? I believe it was the person from last time as well.
Yeah, sure. Tech, finance, management, real estate, construction, etc. Makes more than entertainers and athletes on a broad scale spectrum. Yeah.
Oh, I see where it was referring to now.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you mean. But like MLT said, like let's just take construction for example, or really. And if you take construction, for example, yeah, you have a person who invests in the construction of something, and he would be considered the businessman, and then you actually have the guy with the hat on, so bricks don't fall on his head. That would actually be considered the producer. See, we're for the most part we don't really hire businessmen. We import producers. People who produce software, people who produce, specs and scales and things like that to engineer buildings and things like that. Even on a smaller level, people who produce agricultural goods and, for us to consume. A businessman, he's facilitating the production of that. He's not really producing.
Yeah, but here's what you at some point mentioned the athlete thing, the entertainment route, which is, shall we say, lucrative in your lucrative over here. But really what he's pointing out is that in aggregate, that basically what you're talking about is that small numbers, small chances thing where everybody gets the money, right? Stephen King sells all the books, but in aggregate, right, there's more money in the construction business than in the books business. That's what he's pointing out, that, hey, look, this is the real productive mass of people here, not that whole entertainment. But you were explaining that that's all an illusion anyways, that people want to, the hoop dreams are pipe dreams.
No, here's the thing, Avery, and I get where he's going with this. It's not a good thing to teach every young person to be, a businessman, because they don't. No, there's a huge problem with that, and that is if everybody is, investing or exchanging money or facilitating, a construction project, then who are going to put the hats on? Who's going to, and that's why we have this, like who's going to be the engineers that design the buildings that, the businessman is purchasing. Like
two things, game changer, and both of them you already know, okay? And then we'll get to Dean, and maybe we'll read some more super chats, and maybe we'll do one more round before we close. Number one, it doesn't matter what you tell people. It's not like, tell everybody to become Einstein, and then all of a sudden we're going to have too many Einsteins on our hands. That's not how it works, right?
Exactly.
It's not going to work that way, number one. But then number two, my particular push everybody to globalize, push everyone to become more business-like thing is for the easier maneuverability for the individual, right? To say, okay, well, look out interest rates in this country, bank account in that country. How about another citizenship in this or passport in this country, and form an LLC so that you can then use it to buy any real estate that you buy. Doesn't mean you're going into business, right? You're just taking advantage of other markets that are open out to you right now. And the least you can do is that, because corporations have already had like a long head start ahead of you in terms of that whole taking advantage of open markets, if you.
No, I get what you're saying.
And I get your point that it is burning, right? You know, you're talking about the outside world is getting, you know, usurped, and things are going to happen. You did a nice little Hegelian dialectic there of how it's going to play out. But while it's burning, I'm saying get yours, right? But shout out again to another super chat that I saw here. Thank you very much. I believe it's Technological Chaos. But before I read that one, Dean, did you have any thoughts about what's been going on the past couple minutes?
Well, you asked a question about the individual and what the individual can do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's kind of you should always be the best citizen that you can be, right? That might sound like a super PC way to say things, but you know, in general, you know, when we're having these conversations, it's good for them to be constructive and solutions oriented. That's why when I make the comment about, okay, if immigration is such an issue like you're saying it is, why isn't ADOS a politically active group? You know, just having some type of actual constructive like solutions or conversations.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that would be that's something I personally do, right? So like if there's something wrong with with our communities and we're trying to make improvements or improve the policing, look into being getting involved with your local, you know, local police departments. But that might sound like a super PC thing. I've got a lot of stuff going on in the background, so I apologize.
No.
But,
All good. But it's look, for things to be done, things actually have to get done, and then you have to operate within the organs of the system, right? Without dreaming of, oh well, if I just had this special button that got everything done. It's like, well, there is no such button. You have to actually go to the PTA meeting, for example, right? That is the button. That is the lever. That's how it works. Anyways, game changer. Okay, somebody is pushing back against that whole idea of brain drain because they're talking about the remuneration or the sending back of money. Like Western Union exists and makes millions of dollars based on this, right? People sending back money. So what do you have to say about that, game changer? That overall, perhaps, that even though there's a brain drain from the immigrant countries coming over here, they're sending a lot of money back. Or they also get to the point where they're doing what Ike does. He goes and he actually hires people over there, or he opens up a real estate company in Nigeria, opens up a taxi business in Ghana, something like that.
Well, yeah, that helps. That does help. It helps for only one generation, to be fair, but it does help. And I've seen it. You know, I've seen it in college. You know, they're sponsored by someone back in their country who is you know, wealthy enough to do that. And then, of course, later in life, when they do graduate, they send it back or they go back themselves. That helps. But you see, here's the thing. You can't ignore that, and somebody said in the chat room that Silicon Valley is 70% Indian. However, there isn't a Silicon Valley in India. You know, we can't avoid that, and you know, it won't be one because all of the people capable of creating it are here. So, you know, yeah, they get some of the money back, which is better than nothing. But you know, okay, let's put it like this. Einstein is an immigrant, was an immigrant. Yeah, and if he sent money back home, well, given the circumstances, of course, he wouldn't. But what he contributed to our nation was far greater than money. It was far more valuable than money. It was something that he produced for us that had he produced for his home country, it would have had devastating effect for everybody. Like, the history would be a lot different had he.
Hitler messed up big time.
Yeah, exactly. So now you get what I'm saying, Ike. That's what happens when you send for whatever reason. Like, of course, he didn't like send them off on an H-1B. Like he created a hostile situation, forcing them to leave. But nevertheless, when you lose your best and brightest, you lose something. Should I say explosive? Like you lose something big, and it's a lot of that going on, and it doesn't help the developing country. It just doesn't. Even if they send the money back home, it doesn't.
Shout out to Dini. Okay, thank you also for sharing your thoughts, answering the questions, and having this amicable and interesting conversation with us. Do come back. If please go ahead, like, share, subscribe if you're not already subscribed to the channel. Okay, so game changer. So there are many things in the chat, people going back and forth with regards to what you may or may not have said, and there's this whole businessman straw man that you guys are fighting against over there. But let me ask a question that I already asked before.
Okay.
But in light of everything that has now been said, to the degree to which you care about the outcomes of the African American community, what should the African American voice be as to immigration? Now, it was instead for that maybe it's not very important, that's why it's not up there right now. Right now it's reparations time, whatever it may be, okay, but just forget the fact that it's not hot, or maybe not hot right now, or maybe not even hot for you. But does it affect African Americans? Is this just an identity thing that this clash goes on? What should be, what is wanted? We're asking that question once again. What is owed to the ADOS community by the immigrants?
Yeah, once again, I can't really think of anything that is owed to the Black community at large, and even the things that come close, like paving the way for civil rights that all can appreciate, that immigrants can appreciate. I mean, that's something, but I mean, is that would be something that's owed to past generations, not the descendants who also received the benefits of the civil rights. I really don't see anything that's owed. Like, somebody comes from a poor country and picks eight.
Well, they're not down. Why aren't African immigrants down for the cause? Why isn't Ike, a Nigerian immigrant, more politically active and marching with us?
Well, it's not your cause, so it's not your cause. So why would you be? You don't really have to be that. It's not your fight.
Does that make me a traitor, or at least someone who's suspicious?
It doesn't make you a traitor. I mean, it's not my fight. Like, I mean, was I out there with a machete, protecting the Tutsi? Like, like, no, that's not my business. Like, I mean, was I in Sudan? No, did I boycott certain companies during the 90s because of apartheid? Yes, I did. But that still wasn't my fight. And, it wasn't something that's owed. And also, I want people to understand that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Sometimes when you do stuff, in fact, more often than not, you exacerbate the problem significantly. Okay, an example of this would be in the 90s, in the late 90s, there was an exodus of corporations and a labor shortage due to unionism here in the US. And that's when companies decided to outsource their labor to anyone who would take the who would foot the bill. Now, at the same time, there was a how can I say, there was a huge African identity movement in the Black communities here in the U.S. So under Bill Clinton, he had a choice. It's like, okay, if we're going to export labor, then which countries should we pick? Now, they could have picked Nigeria, but then he feared the backlash of the local Black community, equating it to slavery, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He could have picked any nation in sub-Saharan Africa, but he picked China for that reason. He wouldn't have received the backlash, and he wouldn't have lost the Democratic Party wouldn't have lost the Black vote here in the U.S. Now, as a result of that, if you fast forward 30 or so years, China is a rivaling, superpower. It is a BRICS country, and only one sub-Saharan African country is a BRICS country. So, we have to really think about what we're doing when we do these things. Like, it seems like a good idea at the time. It seems like it's fair and just, and you're helping out the little guy, but often enough you cause more harm than good. Another example, and I just received a call from this jackass, like, he was talking about, should corporations pay their fair share in taxes? Why do they pay less a percentage? And they was talking about San Francisco in particular. Why do they pay a lower percentage in taxes than the individual? And I'm like, well, what if they just left? Like, what if we put it into motion that they had to pay more in taxes and they just took their business to Austin? Like, then where would the Silicon Valley be if they decided to do that? So I think that a lot of the times people don't think stuff through. They just want what seems to be fair at the time.
Yeah. And again, goes my thing. I like how you talk about the road to hell being paved with good intentions. You gave a couple examples there. And the last thing you just mentioned there about looking at pointing fingers at someone else and saying, hey, how come they're getting that break? And I'm like, you could get the same break too, right? You could join a freaking MLM and open an LLC and call your room an office. Start writing that off. Right? I mean, just like, it's not what I'm saying. It's not even like, oh my God, that's crazy. It's like, no, because it's not like they're paying you anything special for that. But just like, and in other words, what I mean is, this is not some fraudulent thing I just told you to do, right? But when you have that LLC, all of a sudden you're going to start scratching your head now as to, well, how you should handle certain assets. So what you consider certain activities to be, right? Should I put my house in my name or under the LLC? All this other little side hustle I'm doing here, maybe I should put these activities under here, and then it can open up this other area of taxes and, or shall we say, tax avoidance to me, right? Anyways, shout out to everyone. There were lots of great questions in the chat. A lot of great things were said over here on the panel. Shout out to Dr. Thunder. Shout out to Deanie. Shout out to also Game Changer and Lion Legal for showing up. I think that we asked the question, what is owed? And with the idea basically being that there needs to be some better behavior coming from both sides. There needs to be some better behavior with regards to stereotypes. I think that Deanie talked about the older population, as you would expect it to be the case, having certain terms or certain phrases or certain not wanting to see Game Changer date their daughter and stuff like that. And who could blame them, right?
Exactly.
So the idea is some better behavior, and with generations, things would tend to smooth out in that regard. But ultimately, immigration is a real thing. Borders, language, and culture are important aspects of what defines a nation. And insofar as the ADOS community is an integral part of the United States, then it has a say as to whom comes in, what they should look like, and how it affects or not their interests, ladies and gentlemen, would be the final thing. So we asked the questions and we got the answers that we want, and there's no boogeyman in there, it seems. That we didn't find any special little answer to what is expected. But until next time, we are gone. Peace.
in the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What's a pity? Tomorrow never certain. What was behind the curtain? The face of evil smirking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble from LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannon could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. Hey, I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Yo, yo, yo. Who's in the house? Well, we got some people in the house. All right. Let's do this then. Shout out to I Wayne. I Wayne. I don't know what the name of this song is, but it's one of my favorite little I Wayne tracks. You know, great rhythms, great flows with I Wayne on the mic. Politician a talk, certain thing they no mention. Say a drugs and gun, the people tax money spend pon. Come with plastic smile and them wicked invention in your hand. Evil intention. Ton gun model, them seeking attention. Shout out, shout out, shout out, shout out, shout out. Rasta tell them all the while, stop war and till the soil. Stop fighting for land and oil. Feed the coil, so many go defile. Save master speak upon them face and watch them tweet a smile. The banks of the Nile, so mad and so fertile. Acres more than a zillion mile.